scientists but are just, admirers of science, to remember that there are people out there who also, accept scientific truth. Sometimes when you live in maybe a more rural place, a place where maybe a more conservative place, you might start to think that you are alone and that you're the only person that feels this way, especially with, all the stuff on the news going on every time Trump opens his mouth. But I think going to marches can really help you realize that it's not futile to keep fighting, that there are other people who will fight alongside you.
In fact, the sign we had said, "Resistance is not futile." There was some concern around the time of the Science March that it was sort of positioning scientists in an us versus them kind of dynamic, so that, people who are more conservative, let's say, may end up being more opposed to science.
Well, and then there's always that danger, I guess, but I think the worst danger is not stepping up, being silent.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, you do have to shove back.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the things that we saw a lot during the Bush years, and we're seeing a lot now also, is the belittling of expertise.
Mm-hmm.
And just sort of it in all senses, not just scientific expertise, but just anyone who's an expert. Their opinion is not valued to the degree that they are experts. And so having scientists who are silent when there are attacks on silence, I think lets that happen. If you have expertise and you're seeing people who are, completely going against it, be it, with vaccines, a doctor who talks to a patient who doesn't want to get their kid vaccinated and says, well, okay, and does not tell them the appropriate risks, is, I think, they're being negligent in a sense. And I think that scientists have a responsibility to speak up when they see science denial, and to say that, no, I have studied this. A lot of people have studied this, and we know it. We know certain things to be true.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about Al Gore's book from 2007, The Assault on Reason.
Mm-hmm.
And that's 10 years ago, right? And I think I had a hope during the Obama years that maybe things were starting to turn around and we were starting to appreciate and respect intellectualism again. But, I'm losing hope a little bit in that regard.
I think I agree with you. I think we were. And that's kind of what got the other side fired up. And I think that's part of why they went after Obama so badly. It wasn't. With some people, it was his skin color, but with some people, it was the fact that he was an intelligent man, that he was Harvard educated, and so it's just, everything they disliked.
And I think this is really interesting because, I know quite a lot of scientists, and they are often quite justifiably proud of their education and the knowledge that they have, but are ready to admit that they have a narrow knowledge, but a deep knowledge in a certain field. I've talked to mechanics who, and engineers, and electricians. And mechanics and electricians have a deep knowledge in a specific field, often not a terribly broad knowledge across all disciplines, but a very deep knowledge in a specific field, a highly technical field that requires understanding of a lot of STEM aspects, who don't hold pride in knowledge. They downplay expertise, and it's often an attitude I see that they don't want to be seen as coming off as too good, as better than their neighbors because of this particular thing. And so it's sort of downplayed, and it's, people who are highly educated, who have masters and doctorates and things like that, have put a lot of effort into education and into becoming, well-informed, and that their justifiable pride in that is often resented.
Well, so I think one maybe final topic that I was really hoping we could talk about is, how do we raise the next generation of scientists? How do we get kids really interested in science? How do we start building that intellectual curiosity?
It starts with schools. We have some wonderful teachers in our school system that really themselves have a passion for science, and it shows in the things they do in the classroom. Also, any university I've ever been at is more than happy to have kids visit the campus. Our department would welcome any school at any age to come in, and we'll try to put some little program together with them. It just takes effort, I think, and a focus on getting children to have a basic curiosity about the world around them at a very early age, and maintain that curiosity. I really believe kids already have a curiosity. For some reason, our society kills that later on, and we got to try to maintain that curiosity in our children.
I think some of the interactions that I have with kids when I'm doing programs is when they ask questions. Sometimes I know answers and can tell them answers, and hopefully that spurs more questions. But the most fun I have is when a kid asks a question I don't know the answer to, and getting really excited about finding out the answer to their question, and really trying to encourage curiosity as much as possible. So if a kid brings me a rock that I've never seen before, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is such a cool rock. Let's find out what it is. I have a book here that has thousands of rocks in it. Let's see if we can figure out what it is. And really trying to encourage them to ask more questions and know that even smart adults who know a lot of things don't know everything. And if you want to know a lot of things, you have to learn. Everything I know, I learned at some point. And so if you want to know a lot, you have to learn a lot, and just really trying to encourage that.
Yeah, I want to put a plug in for museums, too. As a mother of young children, we're very often looking for things to do with them, especially on weekends, especially in the winter when we can't just go to the playground. And we have memberships to 4 local museums, and 3 of those are science museums. So the Museum of Science and Industry, the Field Museum of Natural History, and the Adler Planetarium. We're fortunate enough to live in a big city where it's easy to get to these museums. But we spend a ton of time in the museums, and especially when they have some sort of live interactive show, which isn't always, that can be just amazing for opening eyes of kids. The Museum of Science and Industry here has a show called Poop Happens that talks about the digestive system, and my kids are just constantly doing their own Poop Happens show, talking about the stages of digestion, and they can tell you all about the difference between the large intestine and the small intestine, because they've seen this show, and to them it's just sort of a fun thing, a show they've seen. So that's been one way that we've really tried to encourage our kids to be interested in science.
One recommendation I have is, so if you have younger children like I do, PBS Kids has some really good science shows nowadays. There's 2 in particular that have real scientists on them. There's a show called Dinosaur Train that has a paleontologist on it. And then there's a show called Ready, Jet, Go that has several different physicists and astronomers on it. And so they'll have a segment with an actual scientist who will come on and tell you about either dinosaurs or space. And they'll actually show you, like models, and tell you about actual things in the world. And it's kind of fun because there's a pretty diverse group there. There's some women, and they'll introduce themselves as, "Hi, I'm Dr. Laura," or whatever. And so kids get to really see scientists on the screen talking to them in the show. So I really recommend PBS Kids. They have some really good stuff for younger kids.
And what I think really needs to happen is there needs to be traveling museums to reach kids that will never have an opportunity to walk in the doors of a museum. Something like the bookmobiles we used to have as kids. I think of kids out in the rural areas that don't really have opportunity to come to the Children's Science Museum in Youngstown, for instance, and they're way down in Columbiana County. But it would probably be relatively cheap to outfit a big bus with a bunch of exhibits and hands-on things, and just go around and spend a few days in each school system in a rural area. I'm not going to do this right off. So we have a lot of work cut out for us to try to, I think, ramp up science education in this country. I grew up in a time when we wanted to beat the Russians. And so everything this society did, we put a lot of investment into having the best ideas and the best science because of that. That was the motivating factor. So when I grew up, every kid had a chemistry set. Every kid, whether you lived out in the country or you were in the city. And I don't see that now. I see there's big void, areas of devoid of science education, at least very good and consistent. That's my 2 cents worth.
One of the things that the United States truly is exceptional at is innovation, particularly within the tech realm. We're one of the best places in the world to innovate and to create new devices and objects and things like that. And all of that is reliant on scientific understanding and science skills, and also on basic research. And if you wanted to make America great, you would invest in science, you would play to our strengths, and it is really sad to see that not happening.
Well, let's turn it around. How's that?
Yeah.
We will make America great again.
Yes.
All right, well, I think this has been a really fascinating conversation, and really thank you guys for coming on and sharing your expertise with us.
Yeah,
Thank you guys for spreading the word.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, we're happy to. So, listeners, wanted to remind you how you can get in touch with us. We have an email address that's twobroadstalkingpolitics@gmail.com. And I failed to mention last week that if you've seen our logo for the podcast, that it was created by my husband, Matthew Eflin. So I want to thank him for that.
I want to have a special shout out to Angel Vidal, who inspired us to start this podcast.
Yeah, and so listeners, next week we will be talking about Hillary Clinton's book, What Happened? So read your copies now so you can listen along and hear what we have to say.
It's going to be great. And feel free to send in your questions for us for next week.
Yes, please. All right, everybody, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our theme music is called Sweeter Vermouth and was composed by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com. It is licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0 license. Our logo was created by Matthew Eflin, expressly for Two Broads Talking Politics, and is copyright 2017. You can contact us at twobroadstalkingpolitics@gmail.com or at twobroadstalk on Twitter. Our podcast can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and TuneIn. Please let us know if you have any trouble finding us.